The ultimate thing about this movie is that it's not really about apes, it's about people, and that's what I always liked about it. Even though the apes move like apes and they're more like apes, anything that's said, they're still sort of talking about, and it's still about people, really. And there's all these weird juxtapositions where, to me, actually represents how fragmented society is. Because like, I grew up when people like talking about things, but then you realize they're kind of contradicting themselves, and they're kind of actually saying things that mean actually the opposite. And so I grew up feeling very sort of like when people say reality, like, well, what's reality? You know, it's like, because people are kind of talking in circles and saying things that they believe but they don't feel like they feel, or they're saying, you know, so I've had that sort of disbalanced, fragmented feeling from a very early age, I think. And that's why, again, I think I like this material. It's kind of it's kind of screwing with your brain at every second in some way. Part of the reason I wasn't lured to certain religious things was is that I didn't believe that they. I try to understand the story and get a sense of passion or belief out of it, and you wouldn't. And so therefore, well, it's like, well, what are you really talking about? Belief and spirituality is a feeling. It's not sort of this thing that's spoken like a zombie, you know? Again, I always love this idea of apes talking religion, you know? There's something really, really, really weird about it to me. Everybody sees films in a different way, and I think that that's, especially a film like this, where you're, like I said, you can get a lot of different responses from anybody on it, and I think that that's why I haven't gone out of my way to kind of analyze it, because I'd rather let other people do that and maybe do that later, because I enjoy that. It's people get too literal in life, and that's what I try to react against a little bit, is to let people think things about things that they want to think, and if they believe that that's what it is, then let them, you know, it shows more about them than it does about anything else, and I find that's always interesting. Touching father and son scene. I was so happy, you know, when Charlton Heston said yes to this, because, you know, again, in the circular nature, or this sort of reversal nature of the material, it's like that he came to do this as an ape was amazing. And, you know, he again has one of those voices that just comes on, it just, you get chills, you know, it's like an amazing presence, and so much a part of the, you know, Planet of the Apes mythology, really. And here again, you know, we had the line, but we never tried to treat it like, you know, if people didn't see the first movie, it's like they wouldn't matter, really. Hearing him say it, it's like, that was worth my price of admission for me. Again, the dogs playing cards painting is a crucial element to this movie. You know, my first impression of it was, well, you know, it's like, people shouldn't speak. I mean, because that's what this is, that's part of this. Although I understood from the studio point of view what they were talking about, because once you make it an issue, it's like in the first movie, that's sort of the main issue. So you're kind of remaking that first movie in a certain way. But I did end up taking out a lot of dialogue, of human dialogue, just because it didn't, the more they talked, that wasn't what it's about either. It felt more like it just should be more of a, that shouldn't be the thrust of the issue. It's more, to me, I sort of looked at it more like this. If the first movie, like I said, was complete reversal, here we're coming in a culture where, you know, the humans aren't completely, you know, their self-esteem isn't fully beaten out of them, you know. I mean, given several more hundreds or thousands of years, they would get to that point where they wouldn't speak, and the apes would probably lose some of their ape-like qualities and become like they were more in the first film. So I just sort of treated the whole thing more like we're in this sort of fragmented, both sides of the cultures are fragmented and at an earlier, more fragile time in their history. It felt more, look, the first movie is such a movie of its time. It was, you know, and this time things are so much more fragmented that I just felt that this sort of just represented that more. I mean, it's not as clear in that way as like the first film, because again, that first film has a simplicity and a clarity to those issues and themes that are, easy to identify. But it was written by Rod Serling, so therefore it is like a weird expanded Twilight Zone. And it has that sort of simplicity of its themes and kind of absurdity and seriousness. I mean, it's very much, again, in a work of that time, and him writing it seemed, there were reasons why it sort of came across that way, I think. No, the ending of that, as Richard Zanuck said, there's no way you can either do that movie or top that ending or do that ending. So, we realized that early on, that's why I sort of went back to the ultimate source of the overall material, the book and the other movies, and then just had a weird image in my mind, and so we just decided that we couldn't do that, so we just do this other thing, which I felt there's something about an image of apes in a completely juxtaposed, so it really is apes as humans kind of juxtaposition. That was an aspect of it, and then going back to the overall circular motion to the material, things that aren't in the movie but are kind of been thought about, because it's like you kind of have to have your own big picture of the circular thing, otherwise I couldn't really do it. Even though it may be confusing to people, or like, what the hell, what was that, or what's happening, this or that. I mean, you have to think. I had to think about it and make sure, at least for myself, I had point A to B to C. I tried to watch like what you put in and what you don't put, because sometimes you put in too much, it says too much, and I always held back on this one because I just felt like, again, and this has to do with my own nature, again, about literal people. I have a tendency to really actually maybe want to go too far in that direction, but it's hard for me to fully analyze that. I mean, it is, talking apes, for God's sakes, after all, when you boil it down. As much as we tried to treat it seriously and not enter into campiness, which, on a daily constant reminder, here's people dressed up like cavemen, and here's apes talking, I mean, so the analysis kind of starts to go out the window pretty quick. And it's not the 60s. I mean, you can't, it's like, even if you did it exactly, I don't know, it's a different time. It just seems a little more absurd somehow. And I knew when we tried not to do anything that really crossed over that line. But again, I'm not sure what that line really is exactly. I didn't realize this at the very beginning, but after watching a few samurai films and after getting into ape movements, and that stillness and that kind of standoff, and then slow, then butted up to very quick, powerful, brutal movements, was very much Japanese, very Japanese. As cultures, get older, their original things lose meaning. That's what's always interesting about old stories or old, religious beliefs. It's like you wonder somehow what has turned it into something else. And like I just know from my own mind how from one movie to the next you revise, you kind of reinvent the wheel as you go along. You kind of revise your own history and things and so on a grand level, it's just very interesting to me how much we've done that or do that in our history. Well, I think you make things, I mean, you're a product of your upbringing. I mean, everybody. That's why people say, you always seem to delve into things in your childhood or whatever. The fact is, doesn't everybody? I mean, because not that that's only where you live, but everybody is a product of your own upbringing. So when I want to do something, there may be many different perverse or weird reasons for wanting to do that. It could be a reaction, it's usually both a reaction to something and against something. I find myself, I'm drawn to, it's like what I was saying about chimps. It's like there's something good and evil about them. And I like that juxtaposition of being drawn and being scared, of liking something and not liking something all at the same time.
Together. It was Simos. He's the one who killed
Here again, I may be a product of my land of the lost upbringing, you know. You should at least be grateful that H.R. Puffin stuff doesn't show up.
My friend.
Yeah, I have to always be careful. I have to sometimes stop myself from making that even worse. I planned the ending out to where if they wanted to do other movies, you could track this. Let's put it that way.